I'm here today with Cindy Ogle, our city manager, and we're going to talk a little bit about the budget for the city and also some of the upcoming capital improvements. Cindy, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. We haven't done this in a while, so
That's right.
It's good to be here doing this.
Tell us a little bit about the budget. We just finished the budget process
Yes.
and where we stand in the budget.
Okay. The long and short of the budget, I guess, would be to talk about it from an overall standpoint. The grand total budget this year, which is inclusive of all funds, general fund, water, sewer, special revenue funds, is a little over $44 million, and that is a little less than last year's budget. Basically, the last 3 years, the projected budget along with the previous 2 years have been in the $41 to $44 million range. So what that really says is, and shows, is the levelness of budgets that we have been about these last couple of years.
Stay pretty constant.
Yes, you know, last year was actually a no growth budget, which was the first one that I know of the city doing in the 26 years now that I've been around dealing with budgets and such. So that's not to say that many years ago there was a no growth budget, but certainly in recent history, last year's budget as no growth was the first one, and that's just reflective of the economic situation and of the fact that the city's got to be extremely cognizant, and you commissioners are terribly aware of the economic situation and the fact that you have to recognize that and budget accordingly. And in the case of the city, as in the case of many private businesses in our town, many offer benefits. I know that many do not, but those that do offer benefits, folks know how every year insurance and retirement costs are increasing, in particularly insurance cost. Where the city's not in that boat alone, and so you know, as vice mayor, as an elected official, that we continue dealing with those increasing costs just as folks in the private sector do. So the budgets have been, like you say, pretty even, pretty stable in that regard. The good news that we were able to present to you all in this budget was that there had been some growth in the major revenue categories. None of it just tremendous, but at least there had been some growth. And in particular, if I could just read a couple of the numbers so I don't mess them up. But in terms of gross receipts, there was a 3% increase. Now this is the 03-04 fiscal year against the 02-03 fiscal year. So gross receipts showed an increase of a little over 3%. Restaurant was a little over 5%. Hotel motel was very moderate at 0.23%, and local option sales at 0.24. But because we had some pretty decent growth in terms of gross receipts and restaurant tax, we did do this budget, the 04-05 budget, is not totally no growth. We projected slight increases, basically around 1.4%, with a couple of them even being less than that, and that's in the context of, again, the major tax generators that serve as the basis, as the financial basis for the budget.
And that's not bad with the condition that the economy's been in. To see any increase at all is good.
Yes, we think so. Of course, we would all like, all of us, not just city, but particularly the business people, would like to see more, because the business people are who funds virtually this document. You know, even when you look at property taxes, 70% of that's paid by businesses, and 30%, maybe 35% by the residents. So we would like to see better growth, and we're hopeful for some good times coming. I would say this as well, and this is totally unscientific, but it does seem that a presidential election year historically the economy tends to soften up some.
People want to wait and see what happens.
I guess, you know, I don't know that anyone's ever, again, I know we haven't studied it to really say, but it just seems historically that's the situation. So we need to get through the presidential election and move on, I guess, is
Right.
part of what needs to happen there.
But as you see it, the budget's in good shape.
Yes, sir. I think that the budget that has been presented and approved by you commissioners is a very responsible budget and one that can be met. And so, you know, from that standpoint, we always, all the departments, all of us always want more, you know, to be able to do more, to buy more equipment. Another thing I would say about this budget is that last year also was the first year in many years that we didn't fund any equipment purchases. And this year we were able to do that. And we did it out of a current year surplus because we had such a conservative revenue, actually no growth revenue estimate, and we exceeded that. Then that created some surplus at the end of this past fiscal year, and we showed that to you all, and the decision was made by you commissioners to take some of that money and fund some equipment, particularly in the general fund related to police vehicles, fire vehicles, very needed, necessary equipment for the city to deliver its services, and in particular its emergency services. So that's something that we were very glad to be able to reintroduce into the funding, because it is so important to be about that. Monies are still set aside for the paving program. I think that's something near and dear to people's hearts if they're on a road that needs paved anyway.
Right.
And of course we've been about a paving program for, I guess, 14 years now, where we've had a pretty methodical process that I think has served the city better than kind of a hodgepodge of how much money do you have, and it's still a how much money do you have, but we now have a very good inventory of the roads, and on an annual basis those roads are looked at and determined as to which roads need the repaving the most, and we go through a whole process with you all to review that with you. We have had to cut the paving budget probably by $100,000 this budget and the previous, and of course we don't want that to be the case for too long, because then we fall back behind again. So we will continue to look at that and be hopeful about getting that back up. Full funding there is around $300,000, and this budget has about $170,000 or $180,000 in it. So we need to get back to that point, but we're still in good shape in terms of keeping up with what we need to be about in that regard. So,
with that said, I know we have some new capital projects that we're going to do. Tell us about those.
And quite honestly, that's the best part of this budget, I think, is that in the Special Revenue CIP Fund, due to the creation of the amusement tax, you all were able to fund more than normal, I think would be a fair way to say that, capital projects. And if I could be bureaucratic and boring, more so than I have already been for a couple of minutes, would be to explain, because I think it's important that,
I think it is too.
that we all understand this, that the Special Revenue CIP Fund is a set-aside fund, set aside specifically for tourism-related capital projects and advertising, period. The proceeds that come into that fund are 1/4 of the gross receipts tax, the restaurant tax, and now the amusement tax. And by city law that created those taxes, all of those taxes are to be used for what I just said, tourism-related capital projects and advertising, and nothing else. And so that gets confusing for everybody, quite honestly, maybe more so for city employees that maybe, say, well, how do you go off and do all these other things? And maybe we haven't gotten some stuff over here in the general fund that we think we should have gotten. And the answer is that these are very conscious decisions that city commissions, because it's not just obviously the present one, have made along the course of time that it's important. I mean, the philosophy, I think, is as simple as this. It's important to set aside money to do capital projects
Right.
and to then advertise the product.
Right.
And you can probably express it even better than I can in terms of, I know you certainly spearheaded the amusement tax discussion and effort.
I think it was always a little bit disheartening or discouraging that you had so many capital projects that you wanted to do, but we never had the money to do it. And now that we do have, especially the amusement tax added to these other funds, we can do a lot more to fix up the product, which
Exactly.
is our city, and that's what basically we have to
That's all we
advertise.
have. That's
Yeah.
all we have. You know, the single industry town of tourism, and so we have to be about not just maintaining the product, but upgrading the product.
And improving and making it
improving.
something that people want to come back and see the improvements too. I know that a lot of our guests that come to Gatlinburg, they're excited about new exciting improvements in the future.
Right. This list of projects is the list that you gentlemen actually funded in the budget.
Well, we're here at the community center, and
Yes,
I know
sir.
it has a bowling alley, and one of the projects here is the auto scoring for the bowling center. And I know that other communities around here have it, and
Right.
we have not had it. And it's a $96,000 improvement, but this way it's going to make our bowling center much more competitive.
Right.
And you don't have to know how to keep score anymore. I've bowled several times. I've never found out how to keep score, but I know a lot of people have expressed that they would like this, especially with tournaments and things like that. So that's going to be a real added addition to the community center, which now is such a beautiful center, but it's going to be one more nice addition to it.
Absolutely, and the center is what, 17, 18 years old?
It sure doesn't look like it.
It doesn't at all, and lots of credit to the staff here and to the in-house annual maintenance program that's involved, that they've been about for many, many years, keeping this place looking virtually brand new, but it still requires some improvements.
Right.
And I think that's the point about, and that's the reason that you all funded this automatic scoring for the bowling center. Now, I'm not a bowler at all, so I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know that it will be a very nice improvement for that part of the facility. And then we got a couple of other things that you gentlemen funded in, again, this set-aside capital project fund, and I can't say that enough, so I'll repeat it probably more than I need to. But two other things happening here to improve this facility is expansion of the tone zone,
Right.
which is right up here above us, and I have used it a couple of times. And so this is basically, I think, to double the size of that workout area. And we certainly recognize the need to do that by looking at our sister cities facilities, and of course Pigeon Forges being the newest.
Right.
And so that was a real inspiration to get us to finally get to the point of that project. And I guess that project, I'm going to check the cheat sheet here, is a $30,000 project. And then another recreation project that was funded is a skateboard park.
Now, tell us about that.
Well, and this here again, you probably can talk about better than I can. We came out for a demonstration back in, when was that demonstration? In August?
It was August.
Late to middle of late of August.
Did a little demonstration out here in the parking lot, and they had some of the ramps and jumps, but skateboarding, especially from the X Games in the last few years, and snowboarding has really become super popular. And there's so many kids in town that like to skateboard. I know my 6-year-old, he loves it. My 22-year-old, he's very good at it. And but there's really no place that they can skate and practice and do things like that. So that's why a lot of parents had contacted several of the commissioners and talked to us about putting in a skate park.
Right. And this is proposed to go at Mills Park on the tennis courts that we understand are not utilized that much at all. So that was seems to be the preferred setting, the appropriate place to do this. The skateboard park funding was $30,000 as well. And here again, I don't know a whole lot about that. I have a couple of nephews who have been really big into that in Knoxville, and I know that there's a skateboard facility down there that was featured in a News Sentinel article several months ago, probably a couple of years ago, and they were in that, and it was really interesting for me to read that, because I never was real sure about that skateboarding and what was happening there, but it really is apparently a great outlet for the kids.
It really is, and a lot of the kids from Sevier County have been going to Knoxville
Right.
to be able to take advantage of that. So this is going to be a real good improvement. Plus, as you mentioned on the tennis courts, it's something that's fenced in, can be locked, and it will be supervised.
Right, right.
But
And if I could, before we might move off of those, because we've
Okay.
got a couple of other
Okay.
even larger projects to discuss. We are in the process of bidding those, the bowling, the tone zone, and the skateboard.
Good.
And so we'll be receiving bids on all three of those projects in the next few weeks, and we'll be knowing more about the status of those to be able to report to the public, because we'll be coming to city commission meetings with bid results and such. So we'll be keeping the public advised of that. But we were far enough along, and those projects are, I guess, simple enough, this is for lack of a better way to say it, that we're able to move pretty quickly into the bidding process on those as opposed to some of the others.
now I know we have a very large undertaking that is in the near future, and we had a meeting just the other night on underground utilities through downtown, through the Parkway.
Yes, sir. And we did have a public hearing the other evening. This project will ultimately be funded via a bond issue, and that debt would be serviced with this special revenue CIP fund. There is no specific funding yet in this document, because we're just in the process of getting the plan unveiled to the public and moving through all the technical processes. And so there's no specific funding in the budget document yet for that, but setting that part of it aside, I guess the thing would be to, we have in front of us here the board that we used in the public hearing the other evening. And the concept, I'm going to do the best I can to
Sure.
summarize this.
Sure.
The concept is to move forward with two major phases of undergrounding, which would be labeled phases 4 and 5.
So we've already had 1 through 3.
Right, one being on River Road,
Right.
two being
The aquarium.
around the area, basically from traffic light 3 to 6. Yeah. That area is phase 2, and then phase 3 at the north end of town.
Right.
Okay, that was completed a couple of years ago. So, I mean, as smart as we are, we then moved to 4 and 5
Right.
in terms of the numbering of the project. But the concept is to continue and to do, this is really major stuff, of course, because now we're talking about moving into the true, the central business district. And we're talking about undergrounding all our overhead utilities on Parkway from, and I hope I'm going the right way.
You
Am I
are.
going the right way? Is this Cherokee Orchard?
Yes.
From,
I'm sorry, here's Cherokee
okay,
Orchard.
so yeah.
This way.
So starting at this end from from the intersection of Parkway and Cherokee Orchard Road to somewhere around Reagan Drive is considered phase 4. And then phase 5 would be basically from Reagan Drive up to the convention center. So this is a big deal. The estimated cost is $6.7 million, and the plan that we have brought forth and what was discussed at the public hearing this past week is to do an 80%, the city fund 80% of the project cost, and the property owners be assessed 20% of the project cost. This is carrying forward, I guess, the model that was set up in phase 3.
Right.
the last phase that we did at the north end of town.
Mm-hmm.
That is an 80-20 deal. And we entered into contracts. Now, of course, down there it was pretty simple because it was one property owner on one side and another
Then on
property
the
owner
other.
on the
Right.
other side. So we entered into, we have actual contracts with each of those property owners on the north end of town, and they pay on an annual basis 20% to the city, and that's based upon a 15, I think in that context it may be a 20-year debt schedule, and they, you know, they have, we assign the specific cost on an annual basis, and they pay us on an annual basis. Yeah, you have a board there that...
I've got a few
Right.
boards here. One that shows sort of a before and after. On,
Those are
well, they both
amazing.
do, on some of the areas downtown.
And we might thank, by the way, give credit to Margaret Forsham, who had these photographs made by, and I'm looking for his name. It's on one of these. Is it Robert Beatty?
Yes,
You're gonna have-
Robert Beatty.
Yes. And Margaret brought these to the public hearing the other evening and they have let us keep these so that we can display them.
It shows a before and after, and what a change, what an improvement.
Of course, in the center, it's really the honest to goodness before and after. You know, the others are the what the before and after would look like as we move down Parkway. So the process that the city's into is this official assessment process that's called for under the state law. And you all have passed a resolution on first reading, which is a little unusual. Generally, it takes the form of an ordinance, but under the law, it's a resolution process. So you passed a resolution on first reading in late July, early August. And that called for the public hearing that was held this week.
Right.
Held the public hearing. All the property owners received a specific notice of the public hearing. I guess we had probably 35 people at the hearing the other evening.
Landowners.
Primarily.
Yeah.
And seemed to have some pretty good discussion. There's obvious concerns there. I think more from a construction disruption standpoint. But had the public hearing, and then the second reading of the resolution will be placed before you folks very soon so that you can make a determination as to if we will be proceeding or not. So it's not totally a done deal yet, and I guess we would need to be clear about that.
Right,
And we'll
right.
need to kind of edit something in here in the next few days, as I think we'll know more in the next few days, so that we could be clear with the public about the situation.
It really seemed the other night at the meeting that the atmosphere of most of the landowners was very positive to do this.
Yeah.
And I think, as you mentioned before, you know, fixing the product and improving the product.
And this is, you know, I think that we all realize, having seen phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that it's probably one of the I'm not sure how to say this, because there's a lot of things the city can do and needs to be about, and I don't want to make a statement that sounds like I think this is
the most important,
Yeah, this is
but-
the most important, or this is the panacea or the cure-all or whatever. But I think we all realize that it's a huge part of what the city can be about in terms of improving the product, in terms of improving the aesthetics and just simply the looks of town.
Right.
Because it's such big improvement that you see. And you know, now when you come into town, which that's my route, you know, I do that a lot. You see a view of the mountains that
Right.
you never even really realized were there before.
We have
because
such
of
beautiful mountains around us, to not see them is just really a shame.
So I guess the summary of it again is that the estimated cost at this time, and this is just cost estimates. You know, we haven't moved into the final design of this until you all give us the green light to do so. So the cost estimate is $6.7 million, 20% assessment on the property owners, and Mike, you have the board there that we used the other night to show the public, and plus we did a handout for everyone there so they could see. This is actually based on, it's a formula where you determine the assessed valuation of the project and go through a process of coming up with what the assessment amount is. I think the highest one, and this is for the total project, I think the highest one on the list is $90,000 to $100,000, and probably the lowest one is, you know, $3,000 or $4,000. The property owner would have the option of paying that assessment on the front end in a lump sum amount, or paying it based upon how the city issues the debt. And this, for purposes of discussion now, we're talking a 15-year debt at 5% interest, and so then that's how you get, there's a column on there that shows if you choose to do an annual payment, what that would be. So that's that part of it, and then again, we'll see how the discussion goes over the next few days as to moving forward. The other thing I'm not saying that's real important is that the proposed time frame for the project is phase 4 would begin November of '05, not this November, but November of '05.
Next year.
Next
Okay.
year. And it would be a November '05 through May '06 for the first phase, which again is Cherokee Orchard up to Reagan Drive. And then the phase 5 would be a little bit lesser, but not much, a December through May, a December 06 through May 07. Breaking it up, you know, we looked and talked and had discussions about how to stage it, how to time it, and there is so much that has to be done in each of these phases. And even though phase 5 is a much shorter phase, it's a very, very complicated phase because of the airport road intersection and services running back and forth and things that I don't exactly understand, except that it's an extremely complicated phase. And it had to be broken, it had to be separated out.
I think what was important the other night that Steve Fritz from Barge Wagner, Sumner, and Cannon pointed out that the whole thing's not going to be tore up all at one time. It'll be progression down the street.
Very good point.
Yeah, I know people are really concerned of business disruption, but
Absolutely.
we're going to do everything we can. We even talked about maybe even doing some of the work at night
Right.
or whatever. So there's a lot of different options that we can look at.
Yeah, and I appreciate your bringing that up because it's very important to try to give that kind of physical description that we're not just going to completely tear up Parkway.
Right.
It's going to. I think what he discussed the other night was starting on, and I don't know if it was the east or the west side, but starting on, help me here, what side would we call that side of the road? If you're going toward the park on the left-hand side of the road, is how I would just east.
The east.
The east side. And that's also because there's a sewer line, you remember him bringing this up
Right.
the other night, that needs to be replaced, and it's under the sidewalk on that side. So to go ahead and get in there and try to get all that done and move forward. And he basically discussed starting on that side of the road with the, you know, November, the first part of November of '05, and guesstimating being done on that side of the road, I think he said in January, and then moving across to the other side, and then a January, February, March kind of time frame. But he also emphasized what you said, which is that there would be 100 to 200 feet sections, I think he said, that would be dug up
At a time. Right.
And that there would be, all lanes of traffic would be kept open except in those sections where it would probably get reduced down, I think, to 2-lane traffic,
Right.
1 lane each way. So there will be a lot of effort made in that regard. As you said, there was some suggestions made about working all night long, and we've already added that into the discussion, and probably we'll do some things in terms of the bidding process to do some alternates to really be able to analyze if it's cost effective to do that.
I think it was important too that it was mentioned the other night during like holiday periods and whatnot that the construction would be stopped in adequate
Yes,
time
sir.
before
Yes,
that.
sir.
So some people had a little concern, you know, the Thanksgiving or
Yes.
Christmas holidays and
Easter,
whatnot.
right. And the other thing too, that the work basically would be Monday through Thursday. There would be some early in the day Friday work. But on all phases, maybe not phase 1, but I know phase 2 and phase 3, the contractor learned very quickly that that traffic picked up enough on Friday afternoons that it just wasn't worth
Yeah.
it, you know,
Right.
to be out there doing that. So they pretty much work 10, 12-hour days Monday through Thursday and a few hours on Friday, and then get out of there. We also discussed, in terms of disruption to the businesses, that we would try to minimize the sidewalk disruption.
Right.
And that we're investigating some products that you just literally roll down over torn up sidewalk. That's some kind of, what did he describe it as the other night? Some
Sort of membrane
Yeah,
or something
right.
that won't be tracked in,
Right.
and it'll be easier to walk on,
Right.
push a baby buggy
But
or
as
whatever.
the sidewalk is torn up, because the sidewalks get disrupted obviously in this, when we put back in new sidewalks and new lighting and benches and all the things that we did in these other phases, we would continue the theme and motif there. But that we would, in terms of the public sidewalk that we would disrupt, we would be about temporarily coming back in. And we even discussed a cold mix that the city, that the city uses
Right.
some in the winter time. Obviously, if there's a better product out there, we want to go to that and use that. And the other part in these couple of phases, the other thing that's better is that there is private sidewalk that will not be disruptive because it's not included in this public improvement, that will still enable some pedestrian flow. Now, as we all well know, there's a couple of areas where there is not, the 10-foot setback or that kind of space
Right.
available, but there's a whole lot more of it in this stretch of town than there was in the other parts of the phases 2 and 3 that we've done on Parkway.
I thought it was important too that they mentioned the other night from the first 3 phases that they learned a lot from them. So
Yes.
we're tackling right
Yes.
now, it seems like the most challenging, but what they've learned in the past should make it smoother.
Yes, and that goes for the city. That goes for us city administrative people too.
Yeah.
I would certainly state that too. And we talked the other evening about, we know how, as it relates to that learning experiences, how important it is to communicate with the business people and to try to let the business people know what's happening, when it's happening. We discussed the other evening posting information on the website, on the PEG channel, developing an email list of businesses
right.
and
That's a good
doing
idea.
emailing, and so we recognize that and the need for us to be about communicating with the business people and letting them know what's going on and when it's going on and when we may be in front of your door, doing this work, and
Right.
then you can hopefully plan accordingly, give you a few days, well, hopefully more than a few days, a few weeks notice in that regard, and just do a better job of communicating.
Well, it's going to be a great undertaking, and there's going to be some real growing pains, but by looking at the other phases and how beautiful they are, I think everyone knows that it's going to be worth it.
I hope so. I
do.
hope so.
I do.
I have to interject this. This is something that I've kind of been working behind the scenes with several people, Jim Girding being, a major, I guess, spearhead of these type projects in town, but also Don Kaysen and Betsy Kate, who have and are very involved in the First and Lasting Impressions group that came out of the first Gateway Partners Conference 4 years ago, I guess now, 5 years ago almost. And we've been meeting on and off for some time, talking and looking and thinking and trying to come together with this concept, this plan, this proposal. And it's kind of like, be careful my mother used to say, be careful what you pray for, because you might get it. So,
right.
I think it's exciting. I think obviously, again, you elected officials have got to make the final decision, which, as I said, hopefully will be in the next few days, and we can edit this up or splice something in that will let people know. And it's yet to be determined if you're moving forward, but it seems to have some pretty good momentum now. And so we just have to get ready and absolutely put together the best plan that we can to make this as painless as possible, recognizing that there's just no way for it to be completely painless. But anyway, we will work very diligently. We, the city administration, and I know you commissioners will support us in that effort, along with the contractor and the engineer, to make this as good an experience as we possibly can.
And as we know, the competition for tourism is so great, and people have a choice to go wherever, but with something as huge as this, it's going to, I think, give Gatlinburg a shot in the arm.
I certainly, again, hope so. That's certainly what we're planning on.
Right.
Okay.
So, outside of that, anything else you can
Well,
think
yeah,
of?
there's a couple of other projects that we need to talk about.
Okay.
One of them would be a new clubhouse at the golf course.
Right.
That's a pretty major project that you all have authorized some initial work on. It's not fully funded in this budget, similar to what I've said already about this undergrounding project, but you did set aside some project startup costs for architectural and engineering on a new clubhouse at the golf course.
Right.
You approved a contract just 2 or 3 weeks ago with Mike Smelser, SRA, in terms of that, and I actually have a meeting tomorrow with him and the Golf Pro to begin that project process. And so that's an important project. It may not be as exciting, as visible as what we've just discussed in terms of the undergrounding, but the golf course is a tremendous asset to the city. And we spent some money, I guess it was close to $1 million a few years ago, to redo the greens, to redo the cart paths, to do some things to the course itself.
Right.
And it's been discussed now for 3 or 4 years, the need to be about doing something in regards to the clubhouse. So the funding that's there, that has been approved in this budget, again, is architectural engineering, and that's a full service contract. So I think the goal is that we're going to get this underway, and we'll be meeting back with city commissioners. I'm sure golf members will be involved in discussions.
Right.
And look toward coming back to y'all in the next couple of months with some proposals about what to do in terms of, I think pretty much, as you heard Mike Smelser say at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, commission meeting, that it appeared he's already done a little bit of work for the city looking at the facility, and has pretty much come to the conclusion that tearing down and building a new clubhouse is probably going to be the best thing to do.
Right.
And we're basically talking ultimately a $1 million project, to be clear about that, as to where we're headed for a complete funding of this type project. So that's an exciting venture in terms, again, of keeping up a major capital investment in the city. Years ago there was discussion about selling the course and the city trying to build a course closer in, and we looked and talked and investigated a couple of sites, went out on Ogle Road actually, and things didn't come together. And that was actually when the city in the early 90s decided, well, let's keep what we got, but we need to do some improvements to it. And so I think basically that's what's happening again now, 10, 12 years later.
And we've discussed too with the possibility of income to the city, that in the old clubhouse there's like an area upstairs that's never used, and that could be used for meetings,
Yes.
for banquets,
Yes.
for receptions.
Yes.
And so that's all exciting too.
Right.
And as well as tourism, with the golf industry, it's
Yes.
very competitive in this area too.
And that's a real good point too, to say this, that the golf course is funded in the general fund of the city, and the reality of it is that it actually throws off money into the general fund.
Right.
In other words, the revenues of the golf course more than offset the cost of the operation and maintenance, and so that's a very positive
Right.
thing for the general fund. And so we're excited about moving forward with that. And again, we'll be coming, there's a whole lot of work and discussion to do yet, obviously. But we'll be keeping the public apprised of developments in that regard.
Okay, tell us about the library.
Okay, and that would be actually that there's a couple of y'all authorized some Winterfest display refurbishments that actually are underway right now, since that's going to be upon us before we know it. And another small project in here, but the other large project and the last one to talk about is indeed the library. And many people that would be watching this, I'm sure, would be aware of a long term discussion about expanding the Anna Porter Public Library. And I mean, I'm aware of it from the perspective of at least a 10, 12-year-old discussion. And so this is about, this has come full circle to the city in the budget discussions this summer. Lee Miller, who is the chairman of the board, I think has done a very good job in terms of carrying the banner and the cause on this, and has met with us on several occasions. And basically they came forward and asked that the city co-fund a project to the tune, the total project being around $780,000. So the funding that the city has, the funding that you all have approved in this budget is $390,000 to be matched by the library, of which they have, I think, a pretty good chunk of that money raised, have to raise some more. And so in the course of the discussions about this, as you know, and I guess it probably was the last budget workshop meeting, Commissioner Helton made a really great suggestion about considering building the facility here next to the community center.
Excellent idea.
Right. So from that, that's pretty much where we're headed now. We have actually kicked off that project with a couple of meetings here in this facility. In the meantime, you commissioners approved a pre-design contract with Tom Trotter, with Trotter and Associates. So that's who will be the architect on this project. And so we're in the early stages of that, obviously being pre-designed, as I just said, and looking at, actually, I'm pointing like they can see, but there's a,
the upper parking lot.
The upper parking lot next to the meeting room is a large grassy area, parking area, and generally that's the location. We have officially contacted the Sevier County School Superintendent, Dr. Parton, and asked him in terms of using some county property, because once you get beyond the grass area, the parking back here, that's leased property that the city has. But then beyond that is county, and we think that we're going to need some of that to do this. So Lee and I co-signed a letter to Dr. Parton a few weeks ago. I understand that the school board will actually be acting on that here in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we think that will be a positive action by the board. So until we really get that established about how much of that property we can do, we're just, the architect is really in the process of talking with the library people in terms of what their needs are, trying to develop the program is how I think the architects refer to it, phase that then leads you into figuring out what you need to build in order to meet the needs. So it's really exciting. It's again, I think, you know, we're able to do so many of these things because of the infusion of the amusement tax money into this fund, and that was the intent of it, was to go out and be about doing things to improve the product. And the library may seem a little different, but there's a whole lot of tourists that use the facility.
Absolutely.
And that's so much of what we've heard about, as you well know, is the problem with not enough computers,
Internet
and internet
use,
access, and email access, and those kinds of things.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is indeed, and this is something else that we will need to kind of update our discussion, this kind of discussion for public purposes, so that folks know where we're headed, and keep everyone posted on what's going on with all these things.
Sounds great.
It kind of makes me tired to talk about it.
But it's exciting though, with so many great things in the future, and it's just going to be good for not only the residents but the tourists too.
We certainly, that's exactly the plan, and I think so too. And we encourage, any public comment or input. Feel free to call City Hall, to come to City
Sure.
Commission meetings, to email us, to do whatever to have your input on not only these projects but other concerns that may be out there.
Very good. Cindy, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.